Someone named Cinadon begins to notice just how many people quietly hate the men in charge. Sparta, it smells different from Egypt. There's no river mud, no incense drifting through palace halls, no painted chambers glowing beneath lamplight. Here, there are only tastes of dust, sweat, iron, blood, and discipline. Everything feels stripped down and sharp, cold in a way that has nothing to do with weather. Men rise early, speak little, and train hard. Children are taught obedience before comfort. And weakness is watched. Softness is mocked. Even silence feels disciplined. At the center of this brutal machine stand the Spartiates, the ruling warrior elite, full citizens, men who owned land, commanded armies, and decided who matters. So what's the problem? There are not very many of them. Far fewer than most would imagine, because Sparta rests on something very fragile. A tiny ruling class balanced uneasily atop people with every reason to resent them. The helots, who labor in the fields they do not own. The perioikoi trade, work, and serve without political power. Others live close enough to Spartan authority to feel its weight every day, never fully belong to it. And resentment. This has a way of collecting in places where people are told exactly what they're worth.
I walk through silence, thick and cold, where shadows drift and time grows old. No voice to call, no path to take, just fog and fear with every ache. Souls in the fog.
Somewhere inside this world walks the man Cinadon. Neither poor, nor is he powerless, nor is he an outsider. But he's not really fully one of Sparta's inner circle either. Trusted enough for military service, useful, and capable, yet always standing close enough to power to touch it, and just far enough away to know that it will never truly be his. Imagine Cinadon walking through Sparta, hard-packed earth beneath his sandals, dust rising in the afternoon heat, young warriors drilling nearby, shields striking rhythmically with dull, violent thuds, bronze catching sunlight. Commands are being barked everywhere, reminders of hierarchy, who commands and who obeys, who eats first and who matters. And over time, something begins growing inside of him. Not sudden fury, not a dramatic rebellion, something quieter. Something conspiracies love. Recognition. Because once you notice imbalance, you begin to see it everywhere. And one day, according to the story later preserved by Xenophon, Cinadon takes another man through the agora. This is the Greek market. Seems simple enough and ordinary enough. People moving, traders speaking, dust hanging in the sunlight. Then Cinadon gestures. Look here. And there. And there. Spartiates. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe a handful more. Then he lowers his voice. Now look at everyone else. The workers, the craftsmen, the men standing nearby who hold no real power. The ones expected to obey. The ones who, if given the chance, might gladly see Spartan masters dragged from power. This implication lands hard. Sparta suddenly feels smaller and a lot more vulnerable. A city ruled not by overwhelming force, but by terrifying confidence. What happens if the many stop fearing the few? What happens if resentment becomes organization? If anger finds a leader? And somewhere inside that dangerous question, Cinadon begins whispering. At first, nothing about it looks dangerous, and that's the unsettling part. No secret cave, no midnight oath beneath storm clouds, just conversations. Quiet ones. The kind that begin sideways. A pause too long after a complaint. A look held half a second longer than normal. And Cinadon learns who listens. Who looks over their shoulder before speaking, and who mutters curses under their breath when a Spartiate passes. A blacksmith, wiping sweat from his brow, a hardened veteran with scars and no voice in government. A helot carrying grain beneath the eye of the men he despises. Perioikoi merchants who fight for Sparta, built for Sparta, profit beside Sparta, yet never belong to Sparta. He begins collecting the resentment the way other men collect allies, and resentment in Sparta is plentiful, because beneath the polished myth of Spartan perfection lies something brittle. The ruling class is feared, but they are few, very few. One day Cinadon walks with a trusted companion through the agora again. Dust swirls around ankles, voices overlap, goats complain somewhere nearby. Young warriors laugh too loudly near market stalls, and Cinadon motions casually. There, a Spartiate. And then another, and another. A handful of men scattered throughout the square. The companion watches, unsure, and Cinadon lowers his voice. Now count everyone else. The silence after that matters, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The imbalance, the absurdity, a city of many bent beneath the rule of a tiny few. And then comes the line later remembered like a knife slipped quietly across a table. Each of these men, Cinadon says, would gladly eat the Spartiates raw. Not beat them, not argue with them, raw. Hatred that old rarely sounds civilized. Imagine the feeling. You're standing in open sunlight surrounded by ordinary life, and suddenly the city changes shape in your mind. Every laborer becomes possibility. Every resentful glance becomes potential violence. Every ignored man becomes a future conspirator. The plan grows. Cinadon whispers among men outside the ruling class, inferiors, allies, those denied status. Those who carry weapons for Sparta but possess none of Sparta's political power. Some are soldiers, some are craftsmen. All of them are useful. And the dangerous thing, the conspiracy begins feeling plausible. Because numbers have gravity. When Cinadon sees what Sparta refuses to admit, that if enough people decide fear is over, Spartiates are suddenly very alone. Perhaps he imagines the moment, a coordinated strike, the ruling class caught unprepared, men dragged from homes before dawn, the city overturned in hours, power redistributed, the impossible becoming real. But conspiracies always face the same enemy. People. People talk, people panic, and they calculate survival. And somewhere inside Sparta, someone starts listening a little too carefully. The first crack appears quietly, as cracks usually do. Not with betrayal announced in dramatic fashion, not with a man sprinting toward authorities, shouting warnings through the streets. Just unease. The conversation repeated, a look remembered, the wrong person trusted. Somewhere in Sparta, a man listens to Cinadon and feels something colder than excitement. Fear. Because rebellion sounds thrilling right up until you picture what failure looks like in a city like Sparta. And failure here does not mean prison. It means disappearance, punishment, public ruin, and death. So words begin moving upward, quietly, carefully, toward men who specialize in fear, the ephors. Sparta's watchful political authorities, men who understand better than anyone that power survives by hearing whispers before whispers become knives. One morning, King Agesilaus is informed. No shouting, no panic, no alarm bells echoing through the streets, just a dangerous conversation behind closed doors. Cinadon, a plot, names. Suddenly, Sparta looks different. Because if the accusations are true, this is not merely one bitter man complaining about privilege. This is something larger. A conspiracy broad enough to terrify even the Spartan elites. The city cannot risk open arrests. Not yet. If Cinadon truly has supporters among armed men, panic could spread before answers arrive. So Sparta does what Sparta does best. Control. The plan forms and Cinadon is summoned. Nothing is unusual about this. Trusted enough to serve, useful enough to obey orders, he has no obvious reason to suspect any danger. Morning light cuts hard across the stone as he arrives, and dust gathers beneath his sandals. Bronze flashes somewhere in the distance while boys train in silence. He's given instructions, a mission. Routine enough to feel real. Travel outside the city, gather names, bring back certain individuals. Useful men, necessary men. No reason for suspicion, and Cinadon, confident, perhaps even energized by his own secret plans, accepts. Imagine his state of mind. He believes momentum is finally building. He feels clever, untouchable. A man standing near the edge of history. Because conspirators almost always believe they are the one step ahead, right before they discover that they're not. The road stretches outward from Sparta, dry earth, sharp light. Heat rising slowly as the day grows older. Cinadon rides out, but he is not alone. Not really. Men accompany him. Trusted, loyal men. Loyal to Sparta. And at first nothing changes. Then somewhere beyond the city, everything changes. The trap closes and hands seize him. Weapons appear, and questions arrive, hard and fast. Shock hits before fear. You can almost feel the moment, confusion followed by realization, that terrible instant when memory begins replaying itself at violent speed. Who talked? Who betrayed me? When did they know? Because Sparta already knows enough. Now Sparta wants names. And Sparta has little patience for silence. And Cinadon is dragged back, not as a conspirator in waiting, not as a secret reformer, as proof. And before long, under pressure no sane person envies, names begin surfacing. Associates and supporters, men inside resentment's shadow. The conspiracy that feels so large in whispers suddenly feels frighteningly fragile in daylight. And that is the curse of nearly every conspiracy in history. The moment one person breaks, the whole thing starts unraveling. Sparta doesn't rush. No screaming crowd gathers in the square. No dramatic declaration rolls through the city. Instead, authority settles in like cold weather. Controlled and measured. The kind of control that tells everyone in Sparta something serious is happening long before anyone says it out loud. Cinadon is brought back under guard. Dust clings to sweat, his wrists ache, and his pride definitely hurts worse. And somewhere behind stern faces and careful silence, the city begins quietly tightening around him. The E4s want names. Imagine the pressure. A room too warm, oil smoke hanging just stale in the air, men seated across from you who do not raise their voices because they don't have to. Outside, shields knock in distant drills like a heartbeat Sparta never stops hearing. Inside, every pause stretches. Every silence feels deliberate. Cinadon knows the truth now. The conspiracy is broken. The dream of overturning Sparta, that fragile possibility built from whispered anger and hard stares in the agora, has cracked open. And once conspiracies crack, fear enters, because now every ally becomes uncertainty. Who's spoken? Who's still pretending loyalty? Who saves himself first? One by one, names begin to surface, men tied to resentment, men outside the narrow Spartan elite. Some are shocked when authorities arrive, some probably already expected it. In a city built on discipline, everyone learns quickly when the air changes. Trading continues, children still drill, warriors still eat in common messes, bronze still flashes beneath hard sunlight, but underneath ordinary life, there's tension. The uncomfortable awareness that the city almost faced something dangerous. Not invasion, not foreign armies, something worse. Internal hatred. Because Cinadon's conspiracy reveals an ugly truth that Spartans prefer not to stare at. Many people inside the Spartan system despise the system. The helots, the inferiors, men close to power enough to understand it, but never touch it. People Sparta depends on, people Sparta fears. Maybe that frightens the rulers more than Cinadon himself. Because one conspirator, that's manageable. One angry man is punishable. Though resentment spread across an entire society, it lingers. Eventually punishment arrives, hard and public. Xenophon tells us Cinadon and others are led through the city, bound, beaten, and humiliated before their executions. Imagine the sounds, sandals against packed earth, muttering voices, dust and hot air. The same streets where Cinadon once walked, whispering possibility, now watching consequence. A man who imagines overturning Sparta, reduced to spectacle. A warning made flesh. Do not try this again. Do not mistake numbers for power. Do not forget who rules here. And yet, for all Sparta's punishment, something uncomfortable survives. The conspiracy fails completely, and Cinadon dies. But the fear underneath remains, because Sparta learns something ugly about itself. The people beneath the ruling class are not merely obedient. Many are just waiting, and if given the chance, perhaps willing to tear the whole thing apart. Which is the strange thing about this conspiracy's lesson. Even failed ones expose truths no ruler wants to see. And far from Sparta, another republic begins hearing whispers of danger, not from laborers or outsiders, but from senators and aristocrats, from men in fine robes who believe Rome itself is slipping away. And at the center of it all stands a man with ambition, debt, and a dangerous amount to lose. Catiline. Rome never sleeps, not really. Even at night the city breathes. Sandaled feet slap against worn stone streets. Smoke drifts from cooling fires not fully extinguished. Somewhere, drunken laughter spills from a tavern while dogs bark at movement hidden in alley shadows. Wealthy homes glow softly behind guarded entrances while poor districts crowd tight together in noise, heat, and rumor. The city smells alive. It smells of wine, sweat, olive oil, wet stone, and smoke. Humanity packed too close together, and somewhere inside it walks a man who believes Rome owes him more. The Catiline conspiracy begins, like many conspiracies, with frustration, and at its center stands a man named Lucius Sergius Catilina, Catiline. Born noble, connected, and proud, the kind of Roman who grows up expecting power to arrive eventually because power is simply what men like him are supposed to inherit. Except Rome is changing. Fast. Politics is growing uglier, more expensive, and more vicious. Victory matters, but money matters too. And Catiline has some problems. Debt wraps around him like chains hidden under his expensive fabric. Political defeats sting worse every year. Rivals climb while he stumbles. Elections slip away. The future he imagines for himself keeps moving further and further out of reach. That kind of humiliation eats at people, especially proud men. Picture him moving through Rome, a white toga draped carefully across shoulders, dust gathering near sandal straps, voices everywhere. Senators bargaining, merchants shouting, political gossip moving through crowds faster than disease. Everywhere, reminders of what he does not yet have. And his resentment begins turning into something sharper. Because Rome in 63 BC feels unstable. Veterans feel cheated, aristocrats feud, debt crushes Rome's citizens, political enemies sharpen their knives with smiles. The Republic looks powerful from far away, but up close, there are cracks in the walls. Catiline notices something conspirators throughout history always notice. Angry people are easy to find. Men ruined financially, former soldiers promise rewards that never fully arrive. Young aristocrats hungry for advancement. Men bitter enough to gamble on risk because ordinary life feels like losing. The meetings begin quietly behind closed doors. Wine poured and voices were lowered. No dramatic declarations, no thunder, just dangerous conversations, growing slightly bolder each time. What if things changed? What if debts disappeared? What if power shifted? What if Rome could be remade? At first, it sounds almost reasonable, political and strategic, but conspiracies rarely stay moderate for long. Soon the whispers turn darker. Violence enters the conversation, lists and targets. Power taken instead of earned, and somewhere in Rome sits another man watching and listening. A politician with sharp instincts, and an even sharper tongue. Marcus Tullius Cicero, consul of Rome. And increasingly convinced that somewhere inside his city, someone is plotting something catastrophic. Cicero does not trust easily. You almost have to admire that about him. Rome rewards suspicion, especially if you survive long enough. He's not old money in the way that Catiline is, not born into the highest aristocratic circles. Cicero climbs into power through talent, relentless ambition, and a mouth sharp enough to cut reputations apart in public. Words were his weapon, and lately whispers kept reaching him, and not one rumor, but many. A servant heard something at dinner, a political ally repeats a nervous conversation, and senator quietly warns that Catiline spends too much time with desperate men, and men with too little left to lose. At first, it feels like smoke. Politics in Rome always smell faintly of conspiracy, but smoke has a habit of leading somewhere. Then the rumors start to sharpen: private meetings and debt-ridden nobles, veterans hungry for upheaval, all getting promises and talk of fire, talk of murder, quiet and dangerous conversations of overturning the Republic itself. And suddenly Cicero begins sleeping with one eye open. Imagine Rome through his eyes, the city pressing inward, every shadow hiding possibility, every delayed message irritating, every knock at the door after dark arriving with tension. Servants carrying oil lamps through hallways while conversations stop moments strangers approach. The Republic feels unstable enough already. The last thing Rome needs is a desperate aristocrat deciding to gamble everything. Meanwhile, Catiline is growing bolder, because failure has a way of making dangerous men impatient. He runs for consul again, and he loses again. Another humiliation and another reminder that Rome keeps denying him the future that he thinks belongs to him. And you can almost feel something harden inside of him. Enough waiting, enough speeches, enough pretending politics alone will fix this. If Rome refuses to hand him power, perhaps Rome can be forced. Behind closed doors, the conspiracy changes shape. Wine sloshes into cups, hands move over rough wooden tables. Voices lower. No longer complaints. Plans. Real plans of canceling debts, of revolution, and other whispers, uglier things like assassination, arson, and chaos. Rome shaken hard enough that power might fall into different hands. And one name rises repeatedly: Cicero. He's an obstacle, and obstacles, conspirators decide, can disappear. Somewhere in the city, steel is discussed, murder stops being theory, and suddenly the plot feels frighteningly immediate. Then comes the mistake, or the inevitability. Because conspiracies always leak. Always. A Roman woman named Fulvia hears enough to become frightened. Her lover, Quintus Curius, a man close enough to conspiracy to know too much and reckless enough to talk, lets details slip. Fulvia carries the warning, and Cicero listens. But once he's heard enough, everything changes. Now the whispers have shape. A night attack is allegedly planned. Assassins may come for him. The city itself may be in danger. Picture the tension. Pre-dawn darkness hanging over Rome, cold air settling between stone streets. A consul awake before sunrise, armed guards positioned nearby, servants moving quickly under lamplight. Outside, he hears footsteps, men arriving at his house. Too early. Much too early. And suddenly Rome feels one heartbeat away from violence. The knock comes before dawn, soft. The kind of knock meant to not wake a household, which somehow makes it worse. Inside Cicero's home, lamps burn low against polished walls. Shadows stretch long and uncertain across floors while servants move quickly, quietly speaking, only when necessary. Nobody sleeps properly now, not after the warnings, not after Fulvia's appearance, not after whispers of steel and blood and men arriving in the darkness. Outside the house stand two Roman nobles, Gaius Cornelius and Lucius Varguntius. Respectable names, important enough that on another morning their arrival might mean politics or routine business. But not today. Today, Rome feels wrong. Cicero waits. He doesn't rush to the door, he stands inside, listening. The faint hiss of the oil lamps, a servant breathing too quickly nearby. Cold morning air slips beneath thresholds. Outside, patient footsteps, shifting against the stone. The visitors request entry. Because of course they do. They claim courtesy. It's business. But Cicero already hears Fulvia's warning replaying inside his mind. They may come for you, soon, and at dawn. And suddenly, politeness becomes dangerous. He refuses them. The door stays shut. No audience, no welcome. No entry. Outside, the two men pause, expressions hardening in half-light, a glance exchanged between them, calculation silently made, because if there's innocence here, the refusal feels insulting. But if there's a conspiracy, then somebody inside already knows, and that realization cuts both ways. Inside, Cicero feels something terrible settle into certainty. This is no longer rumor, no longer gossip traded in expensive rooms. Something moves beneath Rome, something organized, something bold enough to test murder before sunrise. And elsewhere in the city, Catiline waits. Restless in darkness, pacing, sitting, standing again. A proud Roman noble wrapped in frustration, humiliation, debt, and fury. Does he expect news? Does he expect success? A messenger returning quietly to say the obstacle is gone. Conspiracies feel strongest just before they crack. And by sunrise, the city changes. Word spreads quickly among Rome's political class. Too quickly. Something is wrong. Cicero knows something. Guards appear where guards were unnecessary yesterday. Conversations lower, eyes narrow. Men who laugh publicly begin whispering privately. Rome, the loudest city in the Republic, suddenly feels cautious. Then Cicero makes his move. He doesn't hide, and he doesn't wait. He drags the fear directly into daylight. As the Senate gathers, robes sweeping marble floors, voices echoing beneath stone, men settling into place, carrying gossip and suspicion. And into that room walks Catiline. Still respected, powerful, and dangerous. At least for now. Then Cicero rises. The room changes because Cicero does not speak like a frightened man. He speaks like someone done pretending. His voice cuts hard into the silence. How long, Catiline? No accusations whispered privately. No rumor. Outright public confrontation. Before senators and rivals in front of all of Rome. How long will you abuse our patience? You can almost feel the air disappear from the room. The heads turning, men suddenly very interested in breathing quietly. Because in Rome, accusations like this do not merely embarrass, they threaten survival. And for the first time, this conspiracy stops being hidden. The chamber goes still, not quiet, still. The quiet would suggest calm, but stillness means danger. The Senate House seems to shrink around the moment. Marble catches pale morning light, sandals scrape once against stone, then stop. Fabric rustles as senators shift carefully, suddenly uncertain where to look. Because everyone in the room understands something immediately. There is no ordinary political insult here. This is exposure. Public violence in its own Roman way. Cicero does not slow down. He stands rigid, voice sharp enough to draw blood without a blade. How long will your madness mock us? No hesitation, the words coming quickly. Meetings, plots, whispers in private houses, murder discussed in darkness. Rome threatened by men who claim to love her while quietly preparing to tear her apart. And all of it delivered while Catiline sits there listening. Imagine the feeling. Every eye in Rome's highest political chamber pressing into you. Men you once drank with refusing to meet your gaze. Others watching too carefully. Trying to decide in real time, did he actually do it? How much does Cicero know? Am I standing too close to the wrong man? Because conspiracy has a smell once exposed. It's the smell of fear. The kind that spreads invisibly through powerful rooms. Catiline rises. He is many things, but timid is not one of them. You can almost picture anger tightening across his face. The humiliation, the shock, the fury. A Roman noble publicly cornered in front of his peers. He pushes back. Defends himself and denounces enemies, and he claims persecution. He pretends outrage that Cicero dares accuse him publicly. But something feels different now, because once suspicion becomes public, neutrality becomes dangerous. Senators begin shifting away, literally and physically. Men who once sit near him suddenly remember somewhere else they would much rather be. Distance becomes survival, and Catiline sees it happening. That may be the cruelest part. Not accusation, but the isolation. Imagine realizing minute by minute that the people are abandoning you while pretending not to. No one wants to be standing beside the man Rome later calls a traitor. Cicero keeps speaking, words crashing one after another. He knows of meetings, knows of plans, knows enough that silence no longer feels possible. And hanging over everything sits one terrifying implication. If Catiline stays, there will be arrest, ruin, and death. If he runs, it's guilt. And the chamber starts to feel a lot hotter for him now. A little too warm, a little too crowded. The Republic suddenly balanced on nerves, and outside Rome continues as normal. Merchants shout and the wagons rattle. Children run through the narrow streets. Citizens argue over the bread prices and politics. Unaware that inside one building, powerful men are quietly deciding whether civil violence awaits just outside the city. And then Catiline makes his choice. Not surrender. Never surrender. If Rome closes against him, then Rome can burn. He leaves the city. Not quietly, and not as a defeated exile, as a man stepping toward open rebellion. North, armed supporters gather. Veterans, debtors, the desperate, the ambitious, men with little left to lose. And suddenly this stops being whispered conspiracy in candlelit rooms, and now it becomes something colder. It becomes a countdown. Night follows uneasily. Rome feels nervous now. You can almost sense it in the streets. Conversations stop faster, doors are closing sooner. Political gossip spreads with the speed of panic. Catiline fled, or he escaped. Maybe he's raising an army. Nah, he's already marching. Nobody fully agrees on the details because fear, it never waits for confirmation. It just moves. Inside homes lit by wavering lamps, senators speak in low voices over wine gone untouched. Merchants wonder whether roads will stay safe. Ordinary Romans, people who care far more about food than constitutional crisis, start quietly asking the same uncomfortable question. Is there about to be a war? And somewhere north of the city, Catiline rides. Cold air replaces Rome's closeness. Dust gives way to rough roads and campfires. The conspiracy that once lived inside whispered rooms now breathes openly among armed men. Veterans are gathering, debt-ridden supporters are arriving, young aristocrats with entirely too much pride and too little caution drift into the camp. Steel glints in the firelight, the horses are stamping by. The men tell themselves stories. Rome is corrupt, Rome has betrayed them. Rome fears change but deserves correction. Every rebellion needs language noble enough to hide the desperation. But beneath the speeches sits a harder truth. Many of these men have nowhere else to go. Catiline moves among them, talking, or more convincing, holding together something fragile, because that is what conspiracies are once they're exposed. They're very fragile. The dream, now it changes shape. No longer a secret revolution, now it's a matter of survival. The hope that force succeeds where whispers failed. Back in Rome, Cicero moves fast. Evidence matters now. Not rumors or speeches, but proof. And proof arrives in a way almost absurd enough to sound fictional. Foreign envoys, the Allobroges, Gauls in Rome seeking relief from political burdens and debts, approached by conspirators hoping for support. Because when desperate men panic, they start expanding plans, recruiting allies and spreading the risk. It's a dangerous instinct. The conspirators speak too openly, promises are made, and commitments are implied. And the Gauls, they hesitate. Imagine their perspective for a second. Foreigners standing inside Rome, listening to nervous aristocrats quietly suggest revolution. Maybe it sounds promising, maybe terrifying, or maybe just foolish. But whatever they think, they do something conspirators always fear. They talk to the wrong people. Or, depending on perspective, the right ones. Suddenly, Cicero has something he craves. Paper, names, intent. A chance to move beyond accusations into proof. And a trap forms. The conspirators arrange communications, messengers leave Rome under darkness, letters travel, commitments get sealed, and waiting for them, guards. At the Mulvian Bridge before dawn, footsteps crunch against the cold ground, the water moves beneath dark stone, mists are clinging low. Men carrying secrets walk into soldiers, commands snap, hands seize cloaks, letters are taken, and just like that, Rome's conspiracy stops being a rumor. It becomes evidence held in Roman hands. The letters are damp with river mist by the time they reach Cicero, still sealed, heavy in the way paper should not feel heavy. Inside them sits something Roman politicians spend entire careers chasing: certainty. Imagine the room, oil lamps burning low against the thinning darkness, tired men standing too straight, the smell of wax, wool, damp air, and sweat, and just a hint of Roman butt crack. Are you still paying attention? Rome is slowly waking up. As the sun rises, Cicero studies the seals, recognizes names, and recognizes handwriting. And maybe for the first time since whispers begin, something close to satisfaction settles in. Because suspicion wins arguments, but evidence will win wars. The trap at the Mulvian Bridge works perfectly. Too perfectly, maybe. The conspirators in Rome still think shadows protect them. Still think private meetings remain private. Still think plans breathe safely in the darkness. They have no idea the Republic now holds proof in its hands. As morning comes, the cold of the night fades, and Rome starts to stir. The citizens crowd the markets, vendors shout, wagons rattle over the stone, and somewhere children chase each other through narrow streets, while priests mutter prayers that no one's paying attention to. And above all of it hangs tension, invisible, but growing. Then Cicero strikes. Not with soldiers, but with theater, Roman theater, political theater. He summons the Senate again. This time, the room feels sharper, more dangerous, because rumors have already spread. Something happened at the bridge. Something was seized. Men arrived pretending calm. Nobody feels calm. The conspirators still inside Rome, men like Publius Lentulus Sura, Gaius Cethegus, Statilius, Gabinius, and Caparus, enter carrying whatever confidence remains. Lentulus especially, an aristocrat, a former consul, the kind of man who still expects history to bend around status. Imagine him walking into the chamber believing politics might still save him. That words might smooth over danger, that Rome remains negotiable. Then Cicero begins opening letters, one after another, publicly, naming names, revealing promises and commitments. Evidence laid bare beneath watching eyes, and you can almost hear the room changing. Small at first, fabric shifting, someone swallowing, a sharp breath held just a little too long. And then silence, the kind where everybody suddenly understands denial is dying in real time. Cicero speaks now, calm and confident, no longer the anxious consul hearing whispers. Now he's the prosecutor holding proof. And the conspirators, watching their future collapse sentence by sentence. Imagine the conspirators, hands still, trying desperately not to look afraid, watching the Senate turn, not gradually, but decisively. Faces harden and the distance grows. Nobody wants to stand beside doomed men, because Rome may forgive many things, but failure is not one of them. The arrests come fast, faster than conspiracy can adjust. Men were seized, homes were searched, weapons were discovered. Cethegus especially, a man whispered to keep blades ready for action, suddenly looks less like a politician and more like danger waiting impatiently. And the city feels electrified. Crowds begin to gather, rumors explode. Some demand executions, while others fear civil war. Some still wonder if Catiline marches south already with rebellion at his back. Because outside Rome, he is still waiting. He's still armed and dangerous. And somewhere in camp, perhaps beneath bitter cold and uncertain stars, Catiline likely learns terrible news. The men inside Rome, the men supposed to help open the door, they're gone. Rome argues with itself, because of course it does. This is still a republic, a city where powerful men still believe that words shape history almost as much as armies. And now comes the question nobody wants responsibility for. What do we do with them? The conspirators sit underground. Men who only days earlier moved comfortably through political life now wait in uncertainty, watched, contained, and suddenly stripped of confidence. Imagine these men, former consuls, men raised inside Roman status and elitehood. Hands no longer free, no servants hovering nearby, no crowds listening politely, just stone walls, the stale air, and the growing realization that Rome has turned cold on them. Outside, rumors run wild, and everyone has an opinion. Nobody feels safe. The Senate gathers again, and debate begins. Conspiracies have a habit of doing something ugly to governments. They make fear argue with law. Some senators hesitate. Roman citizens are not supposed to be executed without a trial. That principle matters, at least in theory. Then comes Julius Caesar. Yes, that's Caesar. Not emperor yet, not conqueror of Gaul, not a legend, just a sharp, ambitious politician standing inside of a dangerous moment. Imagine him rising, measured and controlled, and arguing restraint. He argued for life imprisonment, confiscation of property. Punishment, yes, but lawful punishment, not panic. Not precedent built from fear. And for a moment, the room shifts. Some listen, some nod, because Caesar's argument carries a danger of its own. If Rome abandons law whenever frightened, what happens later? Then another man rises, Marcus Porcius Cato, Cato the Younger, almost painfully devoted to Roman virtue, the kind of man who would rather break than bend. And Cato is furious. Imagine his voice cutting through the chamber. He's not cautious, he's not being academic, he's just furious. Rome is under attack. Men plan murder. Conspirators sit inside the city while an armed rebel waits outside. This is no time for softness, no time for philosophical caution. Delay is weakness, mercy is danger. This shifts the mood again. And fear wins ground, because fear always speaks loudly after a conspiracy. And Cicero, he watches. The stakes are enormous because this choice matters. Too harsh and Rome stains itself. Too soft and Rome risks looking weak. Outside, ordinary Romans crowd streets hungry for news. Torches flicker in gathering dark. Voices rise and overlap. What are they doing? Well, it happens now. Inside the Senate, the decision comes. Death. No trial later, no imprisonment, immediate death. Imagine the weight of that moment settling over the room. The grim certainty. The conspirators are removed, escorted through streets no longer welcoming to them, out into the cold air, where guards wait nearby and Romans watch, some silent, some satisfied, and some are frightened by how quickly the Republic moves once threatened. Then comes Tullianum, the prison, dark and damp, a place built to erase certainty. And one by one, the conspirators descend, men once dressed in wealth and ambition now stepping into shadow. No speeches, no dramatic final defense. History is strangely quiet here. The executions happen. They are fast and final. Above ground, Cicero emerges afterward and speaks only a single word, vexerunt. They have lived. Not they are dead. Lived. Finished. And somewhere beyond Rome, Catiline learns that door is gone. The city conspiracy is shattered. His allies are dead. The Republic no longer vulnerable from within. Now, only one thing remains. War. Winter closes in hard. North of Rome, cold settles across the hills, rough country where Catiline's remaining supporters camp beneath thin shelter and a thinner certainty. This is not the Rome of speeches anymore. No marble halls, no senators adjusting robes and pretending outrage. Here, the air bites. Campfires burn low against damp wind. Cloaks smell of smoke and wet wool. Horses stamp nervously on the frozen ground while tired men stare too long into the flames. Each quietly doing the same math. How bad is this? Because news arrives eventually. It always does. The city conspiracy is gone. The men inside Rome, the ones meant to help fracture power from within, gone. They've been executed. There will be no uprising, no gates thrown open, no fires swallowing the city, just silence. The kind of silence that tells soldiers something ugly. You are alone now. Catiline, hearing this beside firelight, standing in cold dark with officers nearby. The Republic survives and the Senate acts. Cicero won. And suddenly, the conspiracy is shrank. What once felt like revolution now looks much more like desperation. Still, Catiline does not run. He could disappear, slip into exile and spend the rest of his life blaming politics and bad luck. But instead, he stays. Because by now, retreat offers almost nothing but debt and disgrace, certain persecution. Execution later. Forward begins looking easier than surrender, and around him gather men with the same problem. Nothing left. Men who know defeat probably ends badly either way, so they stay. The camp life turns a little harder, food grows uncertain, morale shifts strangely between determination and dread. And at night the men whisper. Some still talk of victory, others stop talking at all. Some quietly vanish if they think escape remains possible, others sharpen blades longer than necessary because keeping their hands busy feels better than thinking. Then comes worse news. The road narrows, Roman forces move. Quintus Metellus Celer blocks escape in one direction. Another army under Gaius Antonius Hybridia, ironically Cicero's own co-consul, through illness soon leaves command to his lieutenant Marcus Petrius, who moves towards them. And the trap closes. Snow dusts high ground, cold settles harder, and Catiline realizes something ugly. Rome isn't looking for a negotiation. Rome wants a swift ending. And maybe for the first time, the conspiracy finally dies inside his mind. No more whispered takeover, no restored glory or political comeback. Just battle. One final gamble, standing before exhausted men, faces worn, hands raw, armor dulled by the weather, smoke drifting sideways in bitter wind. What do you even say at a moment like this? History remembers speeches because, of course it does. Commanders always speak before desperate fights. They have a shared understanding now. No illusions left. It's victory or death. There is nothing in between. Because conspiracies can survive failure. They can survive exposure. Sometimes even betrayal. But once the secret becomes open war, the story changes. Now steel decides. And somewhere near Pistoria, Rome prepares to settle the matter the old way. Morning comes gray, cold enough that breath hangs briefly in the air before disappearing. The hills near Pistoria feel silent in a strange way battlefields often do before men start dying. No birds or laughter, just movement, controlled and tense. Roman soldiers tightening straps with numb fingers, spears rechecked, shields lifted, lowered, adjusted again. And somewhere armor knocks softly against armor while officers move between ranks, speaking low and hard. Across the ground, Catiline waits. No grand army now, just tired, hungry, desperate men. And men who understand perfectly well that retreat no longer exists. Behind them lies mountains, ahead of them is Rome. Imagine standing there among them, wet, cold, settling into cloth, smoke from dying campfires clinging to everything, the metallic smell of sharpened bronze and damp earth. Someone muttering a prayer under their breath, someone else staring into nothing because fear becomes easier if you stop imagining the future. Catiline moves among his soldiers, no palace distance here, close enough to touch. A Roman noble who, whatever else history says about him, does not abandon the men standing beside him. He knows the odds. They all do. Metellus blocks escape. Petrius approaches. The Republic brings discipline, numbers, and patience. This will end here. Still, there's a strange calm that settles over doomed people. Because uncertainty finally disappears. There's no more waiting or wondering. Just the action ahead. Catiline speaks. Fight like men already dead. Fight because surrender means humiliation. Fight because Rome leaves little mercy for traitors. Fight because fear becomes smaller once steel enters your hand. And for a moment, impossible hope flickered, because desperate men sometimes fight the hardest. The armies close, standards move, boots crush frozen ground. Orders snap sharp to the cold air, and then impact. Violent and immediate. Shields slam, mud kicks loose from the ground, metal crashing against metal, men shouting until shouting becomes screaming. No elegant duels, no heroic perfection. Just bodies pressing forward while discipline struggles against panic. Catiline fights. He doesn't vanish behind lines. He doesn't flee. Ancient accounts place him in the center of violence, moving where danger was the thickest, trying desperately to hold a collapsing future together. Bronze striking bronze, labored breathing, the wet sound of injury too close. The smell of churned earth, open, sweat, blood, and air, cold burning your lungs. Men slipping, falling, getting back up, some not getting back up, and slowly, inevitably, Rome begins winning. Because discipline matters, numbers and momentum matter. Catiline's line breaks piece by piece, and hope begins to narrow, then disappears altogether. When it ends, the battlefield feels quieter than it should, the kind of silence earned violently. Bodies scattered across rough ground, broken shields, bent spears, steam rising faintly from cooling blood in the winter air. Roman soldiers move carefully among the dead, searching and counting, confirming. Then someone finds him, Catiline. Far forward, among the fallen, still facing the enemy. And this is where the conspiracy dies, not in Senate speeches or in whispered meetings. Rome learns something uncomfortable. The conspiracy begins with one angry aristocrat, yes. But anger alone does not nearly shake a republic. Debt, division, and political decay does. The desperate do. Catiline failed and the Republic survives, but for a moment Rome looks into the mirror and sees just how fragile power becomes when enough people believe they have nothing left to lose. And not long after Rome survives one conspiracy, another would begin. But this time it won't be against the Republic, it'll be against an emperor. Against a man so feared, hated, and loathed, and unpredictable, that even loyalty begins whispering in shadows. This man's name? Nero. And now we move forward a few years. Rome feels different under Nero, heavier. The city still shines, marble catching sunlight, fountains running cold, markets crowded and the theaters loud, but underneath it sits something harder to name. Because life near power changes when power becomes unpredictable. And Nero, he was extremely unpredictable. The Pisonian conspiracy begins with a problem sitting on the imperial throne. The emperor rules loudly, lavishly, and publicly. He races chariots, performs on stage, craves applause with the hunger of a man who never fully trusts silence. Some adore him, some fear him. Many do both. But fear grows because Rome whispers about executions, about rivals disappearing, about a mother dead, about a wife dead, senators watching words more carefully than breathing. You can imagine dinner conversations in wealthy Roman homes, wine poured, lamps flickering against painted walls, and someone begins a sentence, then stops, then looks around. Starts again, softer, kind of like racists telling jokes. Because under emperors, politics change. You no longer argue with power, you survive it. And somewhere inside Rome's upper circles sits a man named Gaius Calpurnius Piso. Rich, well-connected, and popular. The sort of aristocrat who walks into rooms and seems immediately comfortable there. Practiced smile, expensive robes, the confidence of a man accustomed to attention. Not an emperor, but plausible. Because conspiracies need imagination. Some people can picture replacing the ruler. And increasingly, powerful Romans Begin imagining exactly that. The gatherings start carefully, not cloaked figures in catacombs or secret passwords whispered into darkness, but private homes hosting dinner parties. Political conversations stretch slightly too long after guests should leave. Senator stays behind, an officer lingers. As wine cups refill, voices lower and servants are dismissed. The doors quietly close, oil lamps humming softly, and the smell of roasted meat fading into smoke and expensive perfume. The sound of sandals on the mosaic floors, and men leaning closer now. No one saying treason outright. Not yet. But the shape of it begins to form. How long can this continue? Nero is unstable. Nero is humiliating Rome. Nero kills too freely. And eventually, the forbidden question. What if someone else ruled instead of Nero? And Piso's name surfaces once and then again, not because he storms into rooms demanding power. That would be dangerous. No, because others begin quietly deciding that he makes sense. A safer emperor, a more respectable emperor, a true Roman emperor. And once enough people begin imagining a replacement, the conspiracy changes. Because imagination becomes planning. Planning becomes timing, and timing becomes violence. Somewhere in whispered rooms, men begin discussing something dangerous. Nero's gotta die. Not embarrassed, not pressured, not removed, but killed. The plan shifts around opportunities, public appearances, at theater or the games. Moments where guards relax and proximity becomes possible. One version grows around the games at bay. Another around public performance, a blatant confusion, a strike in the crowd, and the dangerous thing, the circle widens. Senators, equestrians, military officers, writers, courtiers, men tied to influence. Men close enough to power to smell it. Too many of them. Always too many. Because conspiracies, they have an appetite. Every new ally feels like security. Right until security becomes exposure. And somewhere in Rome, unseen at first, fear begins quietly moving ahead of them. At first, the conspiracy feels almost intoxicating. Weeks of whispered confidence, carefully hidden excitement, the dangerous thrill of standing near history, while convincing yourself that you control it. Dinner conversations stretch later into the night, and the lamps burn lower. Wine loosens caution just enough to feel brave, but not reckless. Or so everyone tells themselves. Piso hosts, people gather. Senators recline across couches, pretending normal conversation while listening carefully for certain names, certain pauses, certain signals. Military officers arrive carrying quiet credibility. Poets drift through rooms where politics mixes strangely with performance. Some are furious, some are frightened. Some simply exhausted. Because not everyone joins conspiracies for the same reason. One man dreams of glory, another wants survival. Another still wants revenge, and another wants the uncertainty just to stop. But eventually every conspiracy runs into the same problem. Someone has to actually do the killing. And suddenly the atmosphere changes. Because talking about replacing Nero feels like one thing. Standing close enough to stab an emperor, that feels different. The discussions grow practical, ugly, and detailed. The thought of a blade at public games or an attack during a performance, chaos used as cover. Nero loves spectacle after all, crowds, music, theater, attention. The emperor places himself near people constantly. Opportunity exists. And that almost makes things worse because too much opportunity breeds hesitation. When exactly? Who strikes first? Who protects Piso afterward? What happens to the Praetorians? And who controls Rome once Nero falls? The questions begin to multiply. Certainty begins to shrink. And imagine these rooms now. Getting hotter, getting tighter, the smell of the lamp smoke and the stale wine lingering. Someone tapping fingers nervously, someone else glancing towards servants, suddenly paranoid. Voices dropping lower every meeting. Because once murder becomes practical, fear enters the chat, and fear talks, quietly, carelessly, through pride or panic, maybe even through love. Enter Flavius Scaevinus, one of the conspirators, whose behavior begins attracting dangerous attention. He sharpens a dagger, speaks strangely, acts as if preparing for something larger, gives instructions at home that feel final. He frees his slaves, distributes the reins of his money, tells servants to prepare. You can almost picture the household noticing, a servant pausing mid-task, eyes narrowing, the uncomfortable realization that something is wrong. Then comes the crack. A freed man named Milicus, close enough to observe Scaevinus, grows suspicious, and suspicion under Nero, that's survival. The calculation is simple. Do nothing and risk dying beside the conspirators, or speak and maybe save yourself, maybe earn favor, maybe even survive. So morning comes, and Milicus moves. And he moves fast toward imperial authority, toward Nero. And suddenly, somewhere inside palace walls, a whisper arrives carrying terrifying words. There may be a plot against the emperor. The mood changes instantly. Because emperors survive by fearing exactly this. Doors close, guards move faster, questions begin. Scaevinus is summoned, then questioned. The dagger, the behavior, the preparations. Pressure mounts. And pressure, like fear, has an appetite, because once one man begins unraveling, the whole conspiracy starts shaking. Somewhere across Rome, men who spend weeks whispering about Nero's death begin waking to a terrible possibility. Somebody talked. And panic moves faster than truth. That is the problem. No one knows exactly what Nero knows yet, only that something feels wrong. A summons arrives where no summons should arrive. A servant whispers that guards ask unusual questions. A friend suddenly avoids eye contact. Doors stay closed longer. Conversations end too quickly. Across Rome, men tied to the conspiracy begin quietly asking themselves the same question. How much time do we have? Inside imperial chambers, Nero reacts exactly the way a frightened emperor usually reacts. With urgency, suspicion. Especially suspicion. Imagine him restless beneath lamplight. The emperor who craves applause now suddenly hears danger in silence. He paces, questions everyone, demands names, demands certainty. The palace changes around him. Praetorian guards tighten watch. Messengers rush through corridors, and trusted advisors speak quickly and quietly, but nobody smiles comfortably. Because plots against emperors don't fail gently. They explode. Scaevinus breaks first, or perhaps break is a little simple. Pressure builds, and as questions sharpen and contradictions begin to surface, soon another name emerges, Antonius Natalis. And then more names, and more. The thing about conspiracies, especially elite conspiracies, is that everybody knows somebody. Dinner companions, political allies, friends, lovers, officers, poets, and the web suddenly becomes visible. Imagine Nero hearing names stacked one atop another. The names of senators and military officers, of courtiers and Roman elites. A conspiracy not of outsiders, but insiders. Men close enough to touch power. Men trusted near power. That frightens rulers more than rebellion in distant provinces ever could. Because outsiders, they attack walls, but insiders open doors. The arrests begin, and Rome changes overnight. Bootsteps echo before sunrise. Household doors open to armed men. Lamps flare awake inside wealthy homes where panic spreads faster than explanation. A senator half-dressed, a servant trembling, a wife desperately trying to understand why soldiers are suddenly inside the house. Names circulate like poison. No one knows who talks, and no one knows who still survives. And then the worst instinct appears. People start confessing to save themselves. The atmosphere would look like a city of whispers becoming a city of fear. Friends turning cautious, patrons abandoning clients, men remembering every dangerous dinner conversation they ever had and wondering whether the witnesses were still alive. Some conspirators panic, some deny, some implicate others, and the circle continues to widen. Piso, Natalis, Scaevinus, Lucan the poet, senators and officers, even philosophers drift near suspicion. Rome suddenly feels infected, And somewhere amid the chaos sits Gaius Calpurnius Piso, the man conspirators quietly imagine as an emperor. Perhaps days earlier, the idea felt intoxicating, a future emperor waiting for history. But now every sound outside his door feels like a threat. Every servant's glance is suspicious, every knock terrifying, because conspiracies feel glamorous and secret, but exposure turns them ugly. And Nero, frightened, furious, and humiliated, begins deciding something dangerous. Mercy no longer matters. The city grows quieter. Not literally, Rome is never quiet. Markets still open and wagons still rattle over stone. Arguments erupt in taverns and life continues on. But underneath that is fear. The kind people carry in their posture, because everyone in Rome understands one thing. Nero is afraid. And frightened rulers, they're dangerous. The arrests continue. Time stretches strangely when powerful men suddenly find themselves powerless. Imagine Piso waiting, no crowds, no admirers, no whispered promises of empire, just uncertainty. A man once discussed as Rome's possible future emperor, now staring at the very Roman present he hopes to avoid. And in Nero's Rome, there are really only two endings for accused traitors: death, or the privilege of choosing it yourself. The messengers arrive. The language remains polite because Rome loves ceremony, even when brutal. But everyone understands meaning, and Piso is given instructions. Not imprisonment, not a public trial, just a command. End your own life. History remembers moments like these. The bath was prepared, veins were open. Death arriving slowly enough to think about. And Piso is not alone. Across Rome, the conspiracy dies, person by person. Men who whisper about Nero over wine now sitting beneath imperial judgment. Some meet death calmly, others collapse under fear. Many betray friends first, because survival instincts rarely look noble. Even the poet Lucan, once celebrated, brilliant, and admired, becomes trapped inside Nero's widening suspicions. A poet forced into silence by politics, his words finally useless. Rome devours talent as easily as treason. And then comes Seneca. And suddenly the story is a little heavier, because Seneca wasn't merely elite, he's Nero's former tutor. A philosopher and a statesman, one of the most recognizable men in Rome. Whether deeply involved or merely connected through suspicion matters less now than Nero's mood. And Nero's mood has hardened. The orders arrive. Seneca understands immediately. There's no dramatic resistance, and he has no illusions. Just calm. Stoic, as much as one can be. Friends nearby struggling harder with the moment than he did. Another bath, more veins cut. Conversations held while death approaches with terrible patience. Rome watching another giant quietly removed. And all of it because somewhere in lamplit rooms, powerful men convince themselves that history can be reshaped through secrecy. The conspiracy collapsed completely. Piso, Lucan, Seneca, all dead. The city frightened into obedience, and Nero survives, and that's what makes the Pisonian conspiracy unsettling. It comes terrifyingly close, not because assassins stormed the palace, but because so many people near power quietly decided that power needed to end. Men who smiled publicly while privately imagining replacement. The conspiracy failed spectacularly, and failure leaves scars. Because after this, Nero trusts less and fears much more. He punishes faster, and Rome learns an old lesson once again. The closer conspirators stand to power, the deadlier failure becomes. Then, centuries later, across cold stone streets and smoke-thick London air, another conspiracy will begin. Not against a republic or an emperor. This one is against a king, and it's beneath Parliament itself.